Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives, our 12th Activating Abundance episode, which shocks me. Since I do them once a week, it means 3 months in, a third of the way, or no, a quarter of the way. So I can't even do my math. Because I committed to doing this for 12 months. So we're 3 months in, a quarter in. So today's episode is inspired by Alex Paulos. And if you don't know who he is, I interviewed him back in one of the episodes early on. I think it was in the 40s. I'll link it up in the show notes so you can find it. But he does personality typing. He invented the Paulos method of personality typing. It's fascinating. Fascinating. I love him. And I've actually used him in my second half Spark school. He is so brilliant at what he does and the transformations that he helps. It's just when people really find out who they are, their innate personality, it's not only validating, it's life changing, so life changing. And the things he's done with my students, and we continue to work together and to evolve the relationship and to doing like different things as my student number has grown. Like, how can he come in and his I always include in the program the personality typing. So they do the typing, and then what I started doing is for a special bonus, then he comes in and does training. And he did that. Was this week. He did it for 90 minutes, and it was really and I wanted to say before I get into this, if you don't know where to find show notes, the best way, because I was thinking about this when I was talking, I was always say, oh, check the show notes. When I was a podcast listener before I had my own podcast, I didn't know how the heck to find show notes. So it's not that hard. You can just like scroll. If you're on the Apple podcast, you just scroll all the way down. But the easiest way to find them is go to my website, notyouraveragegrandma.com/podcast. And you can go to the episodes there, and they're super easy because it's a web page. Super easy to find the show notes. And there a lot of times there's links if I mention a book or the guest. If you want to get in touch with the guest that I have, there's links for all that. So I wanted to mention that. But back to the episode, and what I'm going to talk about today is Alex inspired it because Alex did this amazing training. And one of the things he talked about was how we need to be in an environment where we thrive. And in particular, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about it, but certain personality types more so. But, the people that were on this call were the kind of people that wilt, like wither, if they're not in the right environment. Some are strong enough to adapt, but they're kind of the minority. And so the most people, they need to be in an environment in order to thrive. And we don't want to wither, we want to thrive. We want to live a life of thriving. And so I related this to abundance because I thought, oh my gosh, it's like so much. Like, if you're looking for synonyms, when I think abundance, thrive, wilt, wither, lack. And so I thought, wow, I should talk about this because his training was so compelling. And I was like, does it really fit with abundance? And I was like, yes, I think it fits totally with abundance. But it was just really fascinating because he used this analogy of a coconut tree. And he said, will a coconut tree grow in the Rocky Mountains? And no, I don't think so, because a coconut tree needs sun. I think of Florida, warmth, sun, and heat. I guess that's warmth. But in the Rocky Mountains, cold, arid. Yeah, I don't think it would do very good. But he said, how can you get a coconut tree to grow in the Rocky Mountains? Ooh, I had that idea in my head. And then he said it is you have to have an artificial environment. You could have a greenhouse. So you can create an artificial environment for yourself to thrive? I thought, oh, so if we were a coconut tree, if you were a coconut tree, that's the question. Uh, what would you need to thrive? So I thought of three things, kind of environment related, to talk about. And they might not seem on first blush like environment related, but I'll explain. Okay. So the first thing I thought of was, who are you spending time with? Who are you, if you're thinking environment, it's like who you're around, who's circling your wagons. Um, and I think when I was thinking about my own example, I was like, when I started to get into this whole online business space, well, when I started as a Beachbody coach, my daughter was doing it. So she understood, but like nobody my age understood. Nobody that like in my social circles, my age really understood. My sister didn't understand. She thought I was crazy. My mother didn't understand really. Yeah, that it's just like might as well been speaking a foreign language. And so, and I wouldn't say I was withering from that exposure, but I wasn't thriving from that exposure. And I wasn't when I decided to do my own thing and branch out and build my own business instead of just being a part of the Beachbody business, I I needed a support system. I didn't have anybody, and the best thing I ever did was find a coach. And I was close to my 60th birthday, and when I joined his community, I got a family. I got a family of amazing like-minded people, and I no longer withered. It was a thriving environment, and still is to this day a thriving environment. It's a very important part of my life. And a lot of the people that I have met and interviewed on my podcast have come from that community. So when I think of like environment, I think, yes, I leveled my environment because I wanted something different that I didn't have. And so I had to surround myself and change my environment, even though it's mostly virtual. Sometimes we think of environment as our like immediate surroundings, but we live in a very virtual world now. And you can find support systems virtually as well as in person. But you really need to think about who you spend a lot of your time with. And there's this saying of you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that it's true, kind of. And they all rub off on you, because when you start like complaining about something, it's like, oh, and I see this with older people too. I tell my husband, I was like, we're starting to talk about like people's health problems. But it's like if you get wrapped up into like gossip or negative talk about the news and all that kind of stuff, yeah, that's not thriving, really. You got to talk about other things that aren't lack, right? And so, like, who are you working with? Do you work in a toxic work environment? I've had people say that, and it's like they feel so stuck, and it's like, are you really stuck? Or are you just choosing to stay where you are and wither? We have a lot more control than we think we do. We sometimes feel trapped because of finances, but people always think it can't get better than what they have, when in fact it can get better, a lot better than what they have. And we just always think of the worst, right? uh and what kind of a boss do you have, if you have a boss? I've been fortunate to have good bosses for the most part, but do you have a boss that overworks you? Do you have a boss that puts you down? Do you have a boss that never rewards you? So that is not thriving, and you deserve to thrive. What about your neighbors? Do you live in a toxic neighborhood? I just watched a Dateline episode, and one neighbor killed another neighbor. And that was crazy. That was definitely not a thriving situation. Although it wasn't like like wasn't the kind of neighborhood where you lived real close to each other. They had like big pieces of property, but still, like you have a bad neighbor, get the heck out before you get killed. Too much dateline. Uh, but yeah, you're not planted in the right environment. If you're dealing with toxic coworkers, if you're dealing with negative friends, if you're dealing with people who complain all the time, if you're dealing with unsupportive family members, and you want to be around people who are doing what you want to do and who have what you want to have, and then you'll thrive. I remember that's what I saw the coach I picked. He had a podcast. I was listening to his podcast. This was like, oh, he's funny. He's smart. I can learn a lot from him. He can teach me some stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I wanted what he had, a successful online business. And he could teach me that. So, heck, I don't want to wither at home trying to figure it out myself and being around people who don't understand any of that stuff. I'm not going to progress. So yeah, so I made an artificial environment essentially. Yeah, I found my greenhouse. So the second thing that I thought of in terms of environment is, where are you spending your time? So we said who, where, like, are you sitting on the couch and binge watching TV? I mean, that's okay if you're not feeling good and you're sick, but if you're not feeling good and sick every day and that's an excuse, then there's a problem. So I guess it's kind of the where and the what. But what are you choosing? Like what kind of behavior are you choosing? And are you listening to negative news? Like, is that like on replay pretty much? I actually moved my phone out of my bedroom because I was getting up in the morning and reaching for it. And what happens when you reach for your phone and you haven't seen it for a while? All the like little bulletins. And you know what? I'm not even on Twitter, but I get Twitter notifications. I should probably turn them off. So I see all these Twitter messages, and then I like push my finger on one, and I'm like, "What's that?" And then I get sucked into the whole thing. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that in the morning. I'm going to get up and I'm going to get my shake and I'm going to sit in my little sofa where I do my meditation and I listen to my affirmations, and I am going to like thrive mentally. That was my choice, right? That was my choice. I said, okay, picking up my phone is causing me to wither in the morning. I don't want to start off with a withering mind. I want to start off with a thriving mind. Like, what are you reading? Are you reading, like, I love self-help books. I probably read too many of those, but yeah, that I feel like that lights me up. I feel in a thriving place when I am reading those. And some people just escape into trashy novels. And that is something that you got to think, is that making you thrive? How is that making you thrive? Ask that question. Ask a better question. How is this helping me to thrive in life? So, yeah, what are you spending your time on? And I guess that is along the lines of like what habits, and you want to look at your habits and what can you change? What's one little simple thing you can change? I had a podcast interview earlier today, and that was a great tip that she gave. So the third thing and the final thing, and then I'll wrap it up, is, who are you being? Are you being yourself? Your environment can affect who you're showing up as. And many of us have trouble with this. because we want to please people. I mean, it starts when we want to please our parents, we want to please our spouse, our boyfriend, our coworkers, our friends, our sorority sisters, wherever we are, whatever we're doing. Uh, there's a lot of that peer pressure in school. You want to pressure friends on the playground. But really check into this. And are you trying to impress? Are you trying to be somebody you're not? Are you doing what others want you to do and not what you really want to do? Did your parents have a different idea for a career and you did that because that was expected? And now you're in a career and you're miserable at it, in it. And that will cause you to wither. When you're living your authentic self, you will thrive. You will thrive. And when I was speaking of this, I thought about, or when I was thinking about this, made me think back to when I went and saw my now husband. We went to a thing with some friends, but I was married to somebody else at the time. We met some friends and we were like different. We lived in different cities, but it was kind of like this reunion of sorts with friends. And we went to this place to have drinks. And I guess we had been split up for, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years. And I was married. I had 2 little kids at the time. And so I just remember going to the bathroom with my girlfriend and she looked at me and she said, "You glow when you're around him." And I remember thinking, "Oh no, don't say that." I don't think I verbalized it to her, but I was just thinking in my mind, "Don't say that. I'm married. That is not even anything I want to hear." But I felt it. I felt it. And that is when I think about be who you are and don't try to be somebody you're not. It was almost like I couldn't be I was myself. I was so myself with him, like more myself than I've ever been with anybody. But I didn't want to go there because if I went there and really thought that, oh my gosh, yeah, I do feel that way, then that would mean, like, does that mean I don't want to be, does that mean like I have to get divorced? Does that mean, what does that mean? That was like that. And that's not job related. That's not like doing another job because your parents want you to do another job. That's like friggin' realizing you're married to the wrong person. And so I had to suppress that and hide it. And I realized it in that moment, but it was like, no, 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 too much information. Stop saying that. Like erase that. And then of course we ended the evening and I went back to my 2 hours away house and kind of forgot that evening till many, many years later. But yeah, that is the so crazy that came up for me because that was really, I wasn't living authentically. I wasn't being who I was supposed to be. I wasn't being honest with myself. Like I wasn't thriving because I wasn't with the person that I was supposed to be with. And we talk ourselves out of it. We talk ourselves out of it and we put ourselves in the situation that we then think we just have to stay in. We have to live with. And even knowing what I know now, I don't know that I would have done things differently, you know? That was a big, you know, little kids and don't want to screw up everybody else's life. And, a lot of times we do that. That's what we think. I think being older gives you a little bit more freedom to make some different choices. Because I mean, I'm not saying it's going to change people's lives by you living your truth. It's not going to affect people, but I don't think it'll affect them in the same way as if like my kids dealt with my divorce. They were adults. They didn't like it, but it didn't affect them like it would have if they were little. So, yeah, that's my story. That was my segue. Oh my, that's a big one. That was a big one. But yeah, your environment will determine how you're showing up, will affect like whether you can show up authentically or whether you can't show up authentically. And it has to do with jobs. Usually it has to do with relationships too. It has to do with societal norms, societal labels. With me, in that sense, it was a divorce, and that wasn't a possibility for me. So yeah, don't get caught up or sucked in, I guess, to a non-thriving world, because it can be something that is, I mean, if I hope that you get this, is that an environment controls so much of our life, and so much of our life we can change. And our environment, we think we can't, but we can. And when you think of it in these three buckets too, I think, maybe don't change them all at once, but start to just like be aware. Who are you spending time with? How are you spending your time? What are you doing? How are you acting? What behaviors that you can change, and then ultimately change your environment? Well, it can be as little as taking your phone out of the bedroom, not looking at the news, and when you get up in the morning. And who are you being? Who are you, like, how are you showing up? And if you're stifling a truth as it relates to your authenticity, then you're going to feel like you're withering. You will not feel like you're thriving. You won't be in a thriving environment. You won't grow and expand and provide as much as you could provide, because when you thrive, it spreads to other people. And you can be a force too. When you start to thrive, other people will want to find out what you're doing, how to get into that environment too. Yeah. And when you're with the right people, it's amazing. You'll feel it. You'll feel it. And then you can show other people who aren't thriving the way, right? Yeah. All right. So hopefully this made sense to you. I just was like, Alex's talk was too good to not bring up to my audience here. And I was like, I got to talk about this. And it is abundant. It is abundant, because how can you not be abundant when you're thriving? And how easy it is to come from a lack place when you're withering. I just thought that was really powerful. So until next time. Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.